Hello everyone and welcome back to the Jamaican Geologist YouTube channel. This is episode 11 in the Geology Foundation series. And now that we have completed rocks and minerals, I think it is time to explore some basic geological structures. Here we are looking to explore some primary structures for igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary features, as well as some secondary structures which formed after a rock's formation. This is intended to be a very basic introduction to these structures, which will be simple enough for a beginner to follow. The Geology Foundation series continues with a brand new chapter, so let's get started. So let's start with the sedimentary structures. Perhaps one of the most common distinguishing features is bedding. And bedding is simply the layering of rocks into sheet-like units or strata. Think of this like a stack of pancakes. So a rock unit can have clearly defined beds, in which case we say it is well bedded. The opposite of well bedded is massive, and a massive sedimentary unit is a homogeneous rock body with no visible internal layering or stratification. Next is cross bedding, and cross bedding is a sedimentary structure where inclined layers or sets are deposited at an angle to the main bedding plane, usually formed by the migration of ripples or dunes under the influence of wind or water currents, and it records the direction of flow. Next, we have ripple marks, and ripple marks are small wave-like ridges formed on the surface of sediment by the action of moving water or wind, and they indicate the direction of current or wave movement at the time of deposition. Another sedimentary structure is a mud crack, and mud cracks are also called desiccation cracks, and they are polygonal crack-like structures that form when fine-grained water-saturated sediment like clays and muds they dry and they contract and fracture, leaving behind a characteristic network of cracks that often get preserved in the rock record. And they are important because they indicate periodic wetting and drying conditions such as floodplains, tidal flats, or shallow lake margins. And the final sedimentary structure I wish to share with you is graded bedding. And graded bedding is a sedimentary layer that shows a gradual change in grain size with coarser material at the bottom, progressively grading upward into finer material, usually formed as energy decreases during deposition. And they are the hallmark of what we call Boma sequences in turbidites, where the coarsest grains settle first and finer particles settle progressively as the current loses energy. So basically, different grain sizes are deposited as the stream loses energy. So let's talk about some of the basic igneous structures now. Let's start with sills and dikes. A sill is defined as a tabular igneous intrusion having concordant surfaces or of contact. And a dike is defined as discordant or cross-cutting tabular intrusions. Most dikes are vertical or near vertical, having pushed their way through the overlying country rock. In putting it as simply as I can, dikes cut through the rock layers, while sills sort of line themselves up with the country rock. Then there are batholiths and laccoliths. Batholiths are very large, deep-seated plutons, often forming the cores of mountains. Laccoliths are lens-shaped intrusions that push overlying rock upward to form a dome shape. Pillar lavas now are lavas that erupt under water and cool rapidly, and forming rounded pillow-shaped masses or blobs. They can be smooth and slightly ropey sometimes, but the major diagnostic feature is that sort of pillow shape. Finally, I want to share with you vesicles, and I discussed these in a previous video. Vesicles are small cavities in volcanic rocks formed by trapped gas bubbles as lava or magma solidifies, commonly seen in basalt. If these cavities later fill with minerals, they are called amygdales, and their presence indicates that the lava was gas rich. Okay, so metamorphic structures now. I touched on some of these in the previous video. Metamorphic rocks often show two main textures. There's foliation, and foliation looks like flat layers in the rock, kind of like the pages of a book. And lineation looks like lines running through the rock, like scratches or streaks. You see foliation in rocks such as slate and migmatite, and lineation in stretched minerals in schists. Foliation and lineation aren't just rock patterns. They're clues about how the metamorphic rock was deformed. Foliation forms when the rocks are squeezed, so the minerals line up in layers, telling us the direction of compression. Lineation forms when rocks are stretched or sheared, so the minerals get pulled into lines, showing us the direction of flow. So secondary structures formed after the formation of the rock itself. They are usually because of tectonic activity or erosion. Let's talk about three of the most important tectonic structures: faults, folds, and unconformities. First up, faults. A fault is a fracture in the earth where movement has occurred. There are three main types. There are normal faults, where the hanging wall moves down, caused by extension. The crust is being pulled apart. Reverse faults, where the hanging wall moves up, caused by compression. The crust is being squeezed. And strike slip faults, where rocks slide past each other horizontally. Faults are important because they mark zones of earthquakes and can control the movement of groundwater and oil and gas. Second is folds. Folds happen when rocks bend instead of break. The two classic ones are anticlines, which arch upward and they're shaped like an A, and synclines, which dip downward and they're shaped like a U. Folds form under compression and are important because they trap natural resources like oil and gas or groundwater. And they also show us the direction of past tectonic forces. Finally, unconformities are breaks in the geological record. They're missing bits of time in Earth's history. They appear or they happen when older rocks are eroded away before new layers are deposited on top. Think of it like ripping out a chapter of a book, you know? And recognizing an unconformity tells us that big events like mountain building or erosion happened before deposition started. So, why do we study this stuff? Well, things like graded beds and ripple marks can give us an idea about stream flow direction, but why should this matter to those going about their day to school, work, or their businesses? Well, understanding things like faults and their movement helps us to better understand things like earthquakes. Faults also act as a conduit for things like water resources and petroleum resources. Also, knowing where things like faults are help us to make better civil engineering decisions when it comes to structures like roads, bridges, and buildings. And there are many other aspects to consider in our everyday life. But share in the comments if you can think of any. I look forward to hearing from you. So that's a wrap for episode 11. We looked at some basic geological structures from the primary, sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic structures to secondary structures like faults, folds, and unconformities. The next episode is all about plate tectonics. Until then, it's bye for now and thank you for watching.